On this video, I'm continuing a commentary that I've been doing in the book of Job from the Hebrew text. We're in chapter 14. We'll be meditating on that text by reading the Hebrew, translating it into English with a running commentary. To lay the foundation for this chapter, Job laments the brevity of a man's life followed by the finality of the grave. Man, Job says, comes forth like a flower, only to soon wither. His days are appointed and short-lived. Why can't God look away from him and give him a brief respite to enjoy his few short years in peace before he goes to the grave, on which he shall not return? For a moment, however, Job reflects, I believe, on the hope of resurrection. If only man, like a topped off tree, reviving itself at the scent of water, could live again after the grave, Job would willingly go and wait his release. It's my understanding as a Christian minister that the New Testament answers Job's question, where Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. So Job goes on, or this text goes on, with death facing him, however, and the cheerlessness of the grave. Job is depressed that God continues to hound his every step as though he were a great transgressor. So I'm going to read this section, these 6 verses, where he talks about his frailty and brevity, and then we'll look at it verse by verse. Adam yelud isha, katsar yamim usava rogez. Katzitz yatsa vayemal, vayevrach katzel velo ya'amod. Af al zeh pagachta einecha, va'oti tavi v'mishpat imak. Mi yitain ta'or mitame lo achad. Im charutzim yamav, mispar chadashav itach, or chodashav itach. Hukav asita velo ya'avor. Shema me alav vayechdal ad yirtzeh ke sahir yomo. And going back to verse 1. Adam yelud isha katsar yamim usava rogez. Man is born of a woman. His days are few and full of trouble. Job is saying here that man's life is short and full of trouble, as opposed to the long, trouble-free life which he would like to have, which he is seeking. And by the way, this can be compared with Psalm 90, verse 10. And so it continues, and then in verse 2, Katzitz yatsa vayamal, vayevrach katzel velo ya'amod. He comes as a flower and he withers. He flees as a shadow and does not stand or remain or continue. Job likens man's earthly existence to a flower which is short-lived, its beauty soon withers and quickly goes away. And also, he uses the illustration of a quickly passing shadow. And it's interesting, other passages have the same thought in the Hebrew Bible. Psalm 90, verse 6, Psalm 103, verse 15 and following, Isaiah 40, verse 6 and following, Ecclesiastes 6:12. They give similar comparison of man's earthly pilgrimage. And I think about life, and the older I get, the more I realize how fast life goes. It's hard to believe. All of a sudden, you're here, and you say, where did it all go? And so, like a flower that withers, and like a shadow, and my wife and I were watching a shadow yesterday that you could see of a tree against a cement type of let's say, barricade. And when the sun went down, the shadow went away. And it happened so quickly. That's what he's saying here. And when you think of the New Testament, James says, what is your life? It is like a vapor. It's here for a moment and then it's gone. And Jesus encourages us to redeem the time, or Paul in the New Testament encourages us to redeem the time for Christ, because life is fleeting and life is short. We all need to do whatever we can do as long as we have health and life. And so he goes on in verse 3, Af alzeh bakakta einecha ve'oti tavi ve'mishpat imak. And do you open your eyes upon this one, such as me? And do you bring me into judgment with you? In other words, such one with such a fleeting kind of life? Since man is so frail, Job is saying, why is it necessary for God to watch him so intently in order to punish such an ephemeral, fleeting creature? Why is that happening? And so he continues then in verse 4. Mi yatain tahur mitame lo achad. Who can give, and I think here we could render this bring forth or give, a clean thing out of an unclean one? Not one. And so what Job is saying here is, man is not only a fleeting creature, he is born a sinful creature. So Job asks God how he can require man to even look and try to live a perfect life when he does not even have the capacity for doing so. Could not God show clemency to such an erring creature born in such a faulty state? We have the similar thought of Psalm 51, verse 7. In sin, my mother conceived me, the psalmist writes, David writes. And I'm reminded in the New Testament of Paul in Romans 3, who says, there's none righteous, no, not one. Everyone has gone astray and turned from the right way, and on and on. And so Job is saying, why do you take such an imperfect creature and expect something in terms of perfection? And so then he continues in verse 5, Im harutzim yamav mispar chodashav itak hukav asita velo ya'avor. Since His days are determined, and the number of his months is with you. And you then have appointed his boundary, that he cannot pass over or pass by it. Uh, I think what Job is saying, since man's days on earth are already determined by God, since his moons are numbered, and since his extended boundaries of earthly existence are already determined, why can't God turn away from afflicting man and let him live the few short days of the evening of his earthly life in peace and not in what he's going through? Even a hard worker has the evening free from affliction. So give man at the closing of his earthly sojourn a brief respite, pleads Job. And this is continued where we see this about the hireling in verse 5. Or verse 6. Sha'e me alav v'yechdal ad yirtzeh kesachir yomo. Look away from him that he might rest, till he accomplish as a hireling his day. And it's like we had just said, since man's earthly days are already numbered and determined by God, then why can't God turn away from afflicting man and let him live his few short days of the evening of his life in peace, as a hard worker has the evening free from affliction? So give man, again he's saying, at the close of his earthly life, a little respite from this kind of constant pain and suffering that Job is going through. So I'm going to stop there. I'm trying to follow the flow of thought verse by verse, reading the Hebrew, translating it, and talking about the exegetical or interpretive meaning of the text.